Hello and welcome to the Good Old Podcast. I'm Jacquie Franciulli for Wahoo's 24/7. And welcome back after a summer hiatus. The last show we did was post-spring football. So it's nice to be back. Now we're looking forward to the new football season, a basketball season with Ryan Odom as the new head coach. So a lot to talk about and a lot to kind of look forward to in the next few weeks and months. So it's going to be a fun time. So we'll have Good Old Podcasts here on a more frequent basis since things are about to pick up a little bit more. For this week's episode, we got breaking news to kind of start off with on the football side of things. But this is going to be a basketball-focused episode with a special guest coming in the second half of the show. We're going to have Cuts from the Corner coming on to help break down a couple of the new transfers, what to expect from their game, how they fit into Ryan Odom's system. So that's going to happen after the break. But we're also going to discuss some breaking news on the football side of things. I'm going to be doing a more football-focused show next week. I figured it would be best to wait a couple of practices so we can really know those position battles to look out for and where they stand. With 50 new faces, you pretty much have a lot of new guys to kind of sift through and see where things stand with those athletes. So I figured it's best to wait until the first scrimmage, which will happen on Saturday. So all that coming. Now, before we get going, why don't you go ahead and like this video, click on the bell so you're notified when there's new episodes, since they're going to be more frequent now, and go ahead and leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcast. So again, before we go deep dive into the basketball roster, let's dive into the breaking news on the football field. Now on your screens, if you're watching on YouTube, you're going to see Noah Josie leading the way in Wahoo Jacks, and he's an appropriate one to have on your screen because this injury news has a relation to the offensive line. So as we know, during the transfer portal season, Monroe Mills was brought in the winter. He tore his ACL in the spring, and then Virginia had to go back in the portal in the spring to bring in another right tackle option, and that guy was McKeelan Thomas. Well, unfortunately, if you're looking at this video on your screen, you're going to see McKeelan Thomas there on your. He's on a scooter. He fractured a bone in his foot in a non-contact drill, and he is now set to miss multiple months. Virginia head coach Tony Elliott confirmed Wahoo's 24/7's report that Thomas will miss a few months. Now, right now, Elliott said on Wednesday that this could be a 3-month injury. That's usually the average of how long this particular injury does take. Thomas has already had a surgery, so now it's just recovery. But again, it's all about a person's recovery time. So it could be 3 months. That is what the average will look like, but everything will be dependent on McKeelan himself. So that's a tough break for Virginia. You're going to look at Wallace Sunamba, Jack Whitmer, Owalaba, Ben York as possible guys that could compete for that right tackle position. Ben York has been taking a lot of reps with the ones. Wallace Sunamba seemed to have been with the ones, at least grouped with the ones when we saw him on Wednesday during practice. So that is something obviously to watch as they scrimmage on Saturday. But that is not the only bad injury that Virginia has had this fall camp. Cornerback Jamarick Morris, a transfer from Georgia State, he is out for the season after tearing his ACL. He was one of the guys that both Coach John Radzinski and Tony Elliott was saying that was doing well in camp. This is the third ACL injury to the cornerback room. Obviously, Dre Walker and Jam Jackson were two guys that got hurt prior to fall camp. Jam Jackson during spring, Dre Walker after spring. So right now you're thinking of the other cornerback options that came in post-spring. A lot of those DBs came in the second portal, and you're looking at guys like Emmanuel Carley, Donovan Platt, some of those guys that you can see kind of lining up for Virginia. And then obviously you can also have other options there. There's other guys that came in as well. And you also have Jason Brevard, who Virginia sees as nickel, but he also has experience at corner. So all this are going to be what we focus on as Virginia looks at the scrimmage and sees how they perform. But like I said, this is just kind of the breaking news. We'll have more detailed of football moving forward on the Good Old Podcast. But those are two breaking news that we needed to discuss on this week's episode. As Virginia football is having its, fall camp, we do have everything available on our site currently. So if you go to our homepage, you'll see that we'll have features on players. We'll have injury notes. We'll have VIP notes from practice. We are available to have the first 20 minutes open of practice, so we're able to see some things. Obviously, we're going to have a little bit of the scrimmage on Saturday. Not sure how much we'll be able to see, but we will be there on Saturday. So we'll have all that on our site, Wahoo's 24/7. And right now we are running that 50% off VIP promotion, which means comes out to about $5 a month, and you'll save about $50 in a year with that promotion. So all our fall camp coverage will be on Wahoo's 24/7. And then obviously we'll also have 2 episodes coming up detailing and previewing the season and discussing what we have learned so far at fall camp. But for right now, we're going to take a quick break. And on the other side, Cuts from the Corner will join us to discuss Ryan Odom and the Cavalier roster. Just like I promised, we have a special guest on the show today, cutsfromthecorner.com. Cuts, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
I know you've been quite busy this summer. I feel like since Ryan Odom's hiring, especially after all the transfers coming in, I think this is probably the busiest summer you've had in the last few years.
Yeah, easily the biggest summer. Usually I have a little more time to write kind of more pieces on like the state of the program or whatever, because everyone's kind of so familiar with what had been happening under, Tony Bennett's regime. And, there were some changes with Ron Sanchez last year, but this year it's a whole new offensive system, a whole new defensive system, 6 transfers in the portal that are probably worth covering, and then 2 more internationals. So it's a lot.
Yeah, and he does great work. Again, it's cutsfromthecorner.com, and it has a lot of the breakdowns for each individual transfer. That's some good stuff for you to read, kind of sees what their strengths and weaknesses are, breaks down the offense, breaks down their defense. It's a really good stuff on Cuts from the Corner. He's also on the Wahoo's 24/7 message board too, and he kind of dropped some of those links there too. So it's great stuff. I feel like before we kind of go into the weeds here and talk, obviously with Tessandier Ritter's official announcement and all that stuff, I want to get your overall feeling, because Ryan Odom had a big task, right? He had to create a whole new roster. Only 3 guys from last year's roster is on this team, and he had to create a new lineup with his scheme, with his system. Do you feel like he answered the question? Do you feel like he got all the pieces he needed?
Yeah, so I absolutely do. And it's interesting because the last time I did one of these, I had kind of made it through about half of my kind of breakdowns on the players. And I, thought I had a sense, but now I just wrapped up. I haven't written it yet, but my Malik Thomas piece. So it's I've gotten through all of the core incoming transfers now. My perspective's a little bit different, but I think it's actually really interesting how sort of the pieces that we already had kind of engaged with, like Elijah Gertrude and Chance Mallory, how they kind of fit into some of the incoming pieces and complement some of the potential weaknesses, or not even weaknesses, but areas that could be improved. And then how like Ugano and Yenso complements, I think, Johan Grunlow pretty well. So there's a lot of overlapping skill sets across, especially the guards. But there's also a lot of complementary skill sets where they can kind of lift each other up where one might be lacking a little bit.
And obviously the big news over the last, 2 weeks now is that Tessandier Ritter is officially a Cavalier. He gets 2 years of eligibility from the NCAA. So big news for Ryan Odom. And I feel like his addition really makes it that this is a solid unit for Odom. Look at him. He's got great experience in a tough European league with Certain Bilbao. He's a guy who's aggressive, driving to the basket. He averaged 9.3 points per game. He was I think it was 38% from 3. He was projected a second-round guy. Do you feel like this is kind of the win for Odom that kind of sealed that this was a kind of answer all the questions?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we needed Tessandier Ritter to join the roster to be I don't know exactly what the ceiling on this team is yet, but I think to be as good as we can be, his addition was important. I think, without him, there was a little bit of a question mark at that power forward spot. I mean, Devin Tillis would have played it most likely most of the time. And he's a great, stretch 4. He's got a lot of, passing abilities, can shoot from outside. I think there are times where he can be tough on defense, but I think there are also matchups where he might have struggled on the defensive side of the ball. And then with Tessandier Ritter, he brings more of that size and physicality without losing much of that shooting or creation, and probably is even a little better, off the bounce in terms of kind of straight line driving. Tillis is kind of craftier, can kind of post in the mid range. But so, with Tess joining the team, I think with Ritter joining the team, you've got a kind of a complementary skill set at that position as well, where you can kind of go smaller and stretch, or you can go a little bit bigger and defend, but you still aren't losing much of that shooting. So.
And what I like is his combination with Grunlow in the front court. Undoubtedly, I think this is going to be, it's going to be hard to evaluate this new era of college sports. It's hard to evaluate what other teams look like because of how different they look. But when you think UVA ranked 351 in rebounds last year and VCU ranked 36, and you bring in Grunlow and the Ritter, you think, okay, this could be a really good front court for Virginia.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, Yenso is going to be big on that end as well, because, he's tall and long, and I think he's probably the strongest of all of them, or at least he's stronger than Grunlow a little bit. And he's got that kind of ability to match up with some of your bigger centers. Like, there's some good clips of him covering Hunter Dickinson last year at Kansas, and being really intrusive at kind of denying that entry pass and being able to kind of bother him a little bit more than Kansas State was able to when he was off the floor. So, that's a good compliment to Grunlow, who's, I think, got some rim protection, but I think has some ability to kind of get a little stronger and kind of grow into that type of role as well.
So when you look at Grunlow, what is his biggest strength when you see the German?
So I think Grunlow is going to be great playing a true stretch 5 role for us. I think you have the ability to space the floor and kind of play 5 around the arc without losing the interior defense. Like a lot of times when teams try to do that, or when we've even done that in recent years, you kind of lose that interior presence and ability to defend the rim when you go that route, but you don't lose that with Grunlow. He's, able to still defend the rim and block shots and kind of contest. He's very mobile for his size, so he's going to run the floor well, which is really important in Ryan Odom systems. So, he's going to give you that offensive pop where you've got all the spacing to kind of bolster a lot of our playmaking guards, which we have, a lot of our shooting, but then you don't lose the defensive presence to the same degree that you would in most small ball scenarios.
We talked a lot about the international guys that came to Virginia this offseason. Obviously, they were the one with the most questions, especially with Tessandier Ritter, for everything they went on with the NCAA. But obviously, Malik Thomas is another one that gained a waiver with the NCAA. And I think because of all the other dramatics that happened in the offseason, although Malik Thomas was undoubtedly a really good win, he's kind of been left onto the side a little bit. Although I think he's probably, in my opinion, probably the biggest win for Ryan Odom, just because of his scoring ability.
Yeah, Malik Thomas, he is a scorer, and he is a wired scorer, and he will score. I really like his outside shot. I think it's like a 38% 3-point shooter. But he gets into it in a variety of ways. He can kind of come off off ball screen and kind of elevate right into it. He's fine with the catch and shoot. He's very good. But he can, he's got a good step back 3. He can get into it off the dribble. He's really, kind of crafty in that mid-range game. He's got like a nice ability to kind of lull people and then explode and finish around the rim. He's really a strong finisher, so he'll finish through contact a lot. I think he's a little smaller than his listed height, but he's very strong. Like he's stronger than I expected him to be, so that kind of helps with some of the finishing. I will say he sometimes will force things a little bit. He's really kind of takes that offensive burden on himself at times and will kind of jam things into traffic or make an ill-advised play here or there. But I don't think he'll have to do that quite as much with the surrounding cast he has on this roster. So I'm really excited to see how someone like him, who can kind of put a lot of pressure on the defense to defend what he's doing, can, not only get his own points, but also potentially be more of a facilitator this year than he had been last year.
Yeah, and you talked about the 3-point shot at just under 40%. And you look at what Ryan Odom and his staff have done through the portal and who they brought in, and even Chance Mallory, these are guys who have been able to really score from long range. I mean, Devin Tillis, Sam Lewis, Jacquie White, obviously Malik Thomas. You see all these guys in their potential. So all these guys have a really high 3-point percentage. That's what Ryan Odom wanted. And I feel like that's what they needed to run the offensive system that Ryan Odom has done in this past. I mean, I think the Rams finished 21st nationally with how many 3-point attempts they had last year.
Yeah, and they weren't even a great 3-point shooting team last year. They just still kept taking them, which, that's I like that scheme dedication. We're going to see that again. But you're right. I mean, there really aren't many players on this roster who are going to be getting regular playing time who aren't very good outside shooters. I mean, you have Onyenso, who plays that kind of more traditional center role in his system, which is the one role that kind of doesn't act as the other four, is kind of more of a screening rim running type role. Sometimes can be a pick and pop. But other than that, all of your power forwards, Grunlow, we haven't talked about Sam Lewis that much. He was one of the best catch and shoot players in college basketball last year. Chance Mallory has incredibly deep range, and I think we'll get some point guard minutes. Elijah Gertrude is probably the biggest guard question mark with regard to shooting, but I do think he's going to get a good number of minutes this year, both as kind of a defensive stopper, but also, he's really great in transition as well. And I think he's worked on his game from what I've heard. So, it's an exciting roster with most options able to not get a bomb from deep.
We're going to talk a little bit more projections or rotations, because what Ryan Odom does is the exact opposite of what we expected from Tony Bennett and Virginia when it comes to rotations and minutes. Yeah. But you mentioned Sam Lewis. I think with all the names that Virginia is getting, obviously Sam Lewis is very highly ranked in the transfer portal. But it's the guy, like you said, he's one of the best catch and shoot, but no one talks about him as much because of all the drama with some of the other transfers. It feels like he's not an underrated guy, because obviously he's a highly ranked guy, but among the Virginia fan base is a guy that's not discussed as much, but a guy that could really affect this team.
Absolutely. He's not, I think, I don't think many are expecting him to be a starter, but there's a possibility he might. He was the first transfer pulled in, so maybe, it's kind of one of those, as the new players kind of get announced. And then he also came from Toledo, which wasn't a good defensive team at all. And that showed in some of his tape, not his ability, but some of the concepts. And I think the emphasis being put on defense there wasn't as strong as you would want to see. So I think there's some questions about, how does that translate to this level? But from like a physical skills and ability standpoint, he's got everything you'd want. I mean, he's like a legit 6'6". He's very athletic. Everyone talks about his shooting, but I think one thing that really pops from him is he's really good in transition at kind of building up a head of steam, throwing a good outlet pass, or finishing in traffic, which, again, works very well with what Odom's trying to do. Odom's trying to kind of initially push that pace really fast. And then if you don't get something quality at the beginning, then he gets back and runs really good offense. So Lewis is going to fit well into that. I think of all the guards, he's probably the one you would turn to create off the bounce the least, but he's still got a little bit of that in his game. And I think there's going to be enough complementary pieces around him, even at the power forward position, where he won't have to do that much.
Yeah. Man, you talked about being fast. A lot of things are going to change for UVA basketball at the John Paul Jones Arena. I mean, David Tilla said they were trying to change the culture around UVA basketball, and that one of those is about the pace of play. What you mentioned, the guard play. It's safe to say that Dallin Hall will be the starting point guard for Virginia this season. I mean, he's a good passer. He can get his own bucket. What type of guard is Dallin Hall?
So I love Dallin Hall. Dallin Hall is he's still a pass first point guard, I would say, where he's 6'4". He's very athletic. There's a lot of clips of him out there, catching alley-oop dunks, against Iowa State. I mean, he's got, everything you'd want to be able to finish at the rim, and he's got kind of that quick twitch explosiveness. But he's also very strong. He's an older guy. I think for this team, he's still a very good 3-point shooter. He's like 36%. He's got a pretty good catch and shoot. He's actually a little bit better shooting from three off the bounce. But on this team, I think he's mostly going to be setting the table. He's a really good passer. He's a good passer in traffic. He kind of just makes the smart right play. So I imagine he's going to be in the pick and roll a lot with, Grunlow, with Onyenso. looking to kind of get an advantage and either get into the lane and finish, or look to kind of kick it out to, White or Thomas or Lewis or Tillis or DeRitter, pretty much any of these options, to convert from outside. So he won't be the only player on the team certainly creating off the bounce. I think that the offense is designed so that a lot of our guys will be able to do that. I think White and Thomas will have the ball in their hands a lot. I think when Mallory's in, he will. Gertrude probably will as well. But I think Hall will be the primary point in that area who will initiate most of the offense.
And you kind of touched a little bit on possible rotation at the point guard with Hall, Mallory, and Gertrude. And I would say maybe even Jacquie White can kind of fit in that role there at point if they need him, or there's certain rotation they want to do there. But projected rotations is a hot topic, right? When you have a new team, you have all these new faces and a new offensive system. And what's interesting is what I alluded to earlier is how different this is going to be for Virginia's fan base to kind of wrap your head around, because Tony Bennett, it was really about heavy minutes. I mean, when you looked at, like Kihei Clark, London Perantes, you saw how many minutes those guys picked up, and you saw how short the rotations were. And when you look at Ryan Odom, I think over the course of the last few teams, I want to say there was only one team in the course of the last 5 years that 4 guys had heavy minutes. I think most of it, when you look at it over average, maybe only 1 or 2 guys had heavy minutes. Most of the other guys were by far less than 35 minutes. So when you look at that and you see that the guys are going 9, 10 deep, this is going to be an interesting time to project who your guys going to get heavy minutes. Like, I mean, you can assume Dallin Hall is going to be one of those guys. Malik Thomas, I think, will probably have most minutes. It's going to be interesting to see the dynamic there. Have you thought about who are some of those guys that you would see having the most minutes?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, it couldn't be more different, right? I mean, Coach Bennett's system was minimizing possessions, trying to minimize mistakes, slowing the pace down, kind of trying to kill you with efficiency, right? We were going to stop you on defense. We're going to limit all of your opportunities. And then we were going to be a little more efficient on offense and pull out a close win was kind of the formula most of the time. Odom is exactly the opposite. He's trying to wear you down, right? He's trying to, as soon as we get a rebound, that person either pushes the ball up the floor or outlets it. He's going to put pressure on you to get back on defense. He's going to kind of wear you down to make sure that you're contesting everything. And then on the defensive side, he's trying to create chaos, right? He's, playing drop coverage with his centers, but all of his guards are kind of free to freelance at times and kind of try to create havoc and try to speed the other team up and just be really physical. So that leads to some foul trouble sometimes. That leads to, needing to get a lot of guys into the rotation so that we're not getting tired, but we're potentially wearing the other team down if they have a shorter rotation. So you're going to see a lot of minutes. Like, I would probably expect a minimum of 10 guys getting heavy minutes on this team. I think the starting lineup will probably be Hall, White, Thomas, DeRitter. And then I would imagine, at least by the end of the year, it will be Grunlow. There's a chance Onyenso could start at the beginning of the year, depending on how practice shakes out, but it'll probably be Grunlow. So you're looking at that being the starting 5. But I don't imagine most of those players will be getting over 30 minutes. I think there's a chance Hall could get up there. Thomas might, I think he could be in the low 30s. But, I think your guard play between Mallory and Gertrude, you're going to want those guys on the court. I think Gertrude's going to play more than many people think because of his just absolute, athletic prowess. And I think he'll be a lot of the things that maybe some of our other guards are lacking, but maybe they have that he doesn't. So, I think you're going to see a pretty healthy distribution of minutes across the team with a lot of guys getting 10 to 15 minutes that maybe you wouldn't necessarily expect under like a Bennett system.
When you look at this roster, who is the guy that you feel is kind of going under the radar and could possibly have a breakout year, if you want to call it?
I think it's Elijah Gertrude, actually. I mean, there are probably a couple of players that I would say might surprise UVA fans this year. And I think Elijah Gertrude, Sam Lewis, and Ugonna Onyenso are probably the ones that have the potential to make the biggest impact that probably aren't being viewed that way right now. But I would go to Gertrude as sort of the biggest sleeper. He was dealing with that injury. So you kind of question, is that athleticism going to come back? People haven't seen him in a while, so they don't really know what to expect. Last time we saw him, he was incredibly athletic, but he didn't really have a great outside shot. He had a decent little pull up in the mid range. He was electric running the floor. He played really good defense, but maybe didn't know the defensive system as well. I think that's going to be different from everything we've heard. His athleticism is back. He's really worked on his ball handling. His shooting is better. One of the first things Dallin Hall said on his interview about Gertrude was his athleticism, but then he also mentioned he's a very good shooter, which if he had met him 2 years ago, I don't know if that's what he would have led with, right? So I think Gertrude has a chance to surprise, and I think he's the kind of guard that Ryan Odom absolutely loves because he's going to provide a defensive edge that I don't think really any of our other guards offer in terms of just the ability to disrupt, kind of fly over the court. And then I don't think anyone's going to even parallel him in transition. I think he's just going to be very effective in that way when he's out there. So I think Gertrude's going to get more minutes than most expect. I think, especially having watched the film on all the guards now, I think we'll probably look to him as someone who can come in and potentially shut down an opposing guard who might be having a good offensive game or something. So I think he's gonna surprise us here.
One final thing before I let you go. You talk about Gertrude being the breakout guy. What's your bold prediction for the first season in Ryan Odom's era?
Bold prediction for this season?
Bold prediction.
I think they'll finish top 3 in the ACC is my bold prediction. I don't know how bold that is, but I think, you've got the Dukes, Louisvilles, and UNCs of the world. I think they'll finish top 3. I do think they'll make the NCAA tournament this year. And I think that it will be a proof of concept that we show for future years where, this model of how Odom likes to construct a system, when you complement it with the type of talent we've brought in, is very formidable. And I think that'll be appealing for, the program down the road.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting world, where it's going to be interesting how he moves forward after this year. Obviously, got to play the season and all that stuff, but it's interesting with recruiting, how things are changing so much and how much he relies on the international recruiting scene. So it'll be interesting how that moves forward for Ryan Odom and company. But Cuts, thank you so much for joining us today. Talk a little bit about hoops and just let us know what's coming up on cutsfromthecorner.com.
Thanks. Yeah. My next piece will be a feature piece on Malik Thomas. So they're called Tracking a Transfer. I'll break down, all elements of his game on both the offensive and defensive side. I think, most people are used to seeing these transfer portal tapes, right? But it's sort of all offensive highlights and like the best parts. So I try to, watch a lot of tape and kind of break down, I think the totality of their game and what I think are strengths and areas for improvement and potential weaknesses, and then talk a little bit about how they fit into the broader roster and what Ryan Odom's trying to do. Now,
Cuts also puts his stuff on our message boards, Wahoos247.com. So keep an eye on that whenever he puts it on our message boards. And as far as Wahoos247, expect football to be our main focus moving forward until basketball season comes. So obviously, we're in the middle of fall camp, so a lot of coverage is coming on Wahoos247. But for Cuts, thank you so much, and I hope you guys have the best rest of your week, and we'll see you here soon.